So I guess I'm wondering what the evolutionary advantage of dreams are, and my question would be, do you think that dreams suggest some sort of evolutionary group selection, such that like groups that don't have these dreams that are represented into myths and religion, do you think they didn't survive as well?
Okay, so I'm not going to answer the second part of that question because I'd have to go too far off at a tangent for me to manage right now, but I can answer the first part. I mean, what happens when you're dreaming, there's a little switch, so to speak, in your brain that shuts off when you're dreaming, and it stops you from moving, right? It shuts everything off except your eyes, because if you're moving your eyes back and forth, you're not going to run around and get eaten by a lion. It's okay to move your eyes. But the rest of you is staying exactly where it is. Then you can run these simulations. And so what's happening at night, and this is a fairly well accepted theory of dreaming. We know that dreams update memories and help consolidate memories. They also help you forget. But what seems to be happening at night is that you're running the underlying architecture of your cognitive ability in different simulations. And it's cost-free because you're paralyzed. You're not running around there out in the world investigating. So it's part of the manner in which your brain experiments with the way the world can be represented. And so, and it seems absolutely necessary. And I mean, if you deprive people of REM sleep, they don't stay sane very long. There's something necessary about the dreaming process to maintenance of articulated sanity. So you're doing some kind of organization at night when you descend into that chaos. And partly what seems to happen is that your categorical, your categories have boundaries, right? But sometimes you don't have the categories correct. And so the boundaries have to loosen and other things need to be put in the categories or some things shunted away. And in the dream, the category structure loosens, which is why dreams are so peculiar. But they're experimenting. It's your mind is experimenting with the underlying categorical structure of imagination and trying to update your mode of being in the world. Dreams often concentrate on things that provoke anxiety. So if you wake people up when they're dreaming, the most commonly reported emotion is anxiety. And so the dream is like the first stages of the attempt to contend with the unknown. And so the dream is half unknown and half known, which is also why it's so peculiar, because you kind of understand it, but you don't really. And it partakes of the unknown and of the known. And it's the bridge between the two, something like that. So.
Okay, so my question is kind of two parts. The first one is just like a general question and then just the application of the question. So my first question is, do you think that consciousness and beinghood are inextricably linked? And then secondly, so if there was something like a supercomputer that one could house theoretically a perfect brain of a person in it, does that thing then become the same person as the person who was before? So is there a transcendency to beinghood but not to conscious?
Okay, so the first question is, well, I would say that the kind of being that these stories are concerned with is absolutely dependent on consciousness. Now, whether or not that means that being as such is dependent on consciousness actually depends on how you define being. Right? So it's always tricky when you ask, if is an example of B? Those are tricky questions because it depends on how you define the two. But for our purposes, the being that we're discussing that's represented in these stories is intrinsically associated with conscious experience. And consciousness is given this constitutive role. It says that the experience that we're talking about would not exist if consciousness did not exist. So you can think about it as a kind of game in a way, and then you have to decide for yourself whether that's a game that can be generalized. And I won't answer the second part, okay? If you don't mind. All right.
So, two-part question. First one's very quick, almost admin. If we want to read the biblical stories that kind of you're referring to, is there a particular version, edition, source, publisher that we should refer to?
Oh, I'll bring the thing I like next week, which is I think the Reader's Digest published it of all things, but it's it lays out the narratives in a different format. It's easier. I find it much easier to read. So I'll show it to you, and I'll bring it next time and show it to you.
And then the main question is, one of the main reasons why I'm interested in so much of your work, and I think many people are as well, is that you kind of leave literalism at the door and you open up another door to a much more deeper meaning. In your interview with Transliminal Media, you mentioned Liz Eibel's book, The Serpent, the Tree, the Serpent and Vision. And you note that we as a species are very good at recognizing camouflage patterns of snakes, particularly in the lower field of vision. And you further note that visual acuity is correlated with that, and that it co-evolved. And you summarize thusly by saying the following, and I'm paraphrasing you. You say, what gives you vision? Snakes do. That's what it says in Genesis. What else gives you vision? Fruit. That's also right. That's why we have color vision. What makes you self-conscious if you're a man? Woman. That's Eve. And so I understand at the elementary level some of the concepts that you have about representations, dreams, abstractions, etc. But kind of raises the question for me, you know, I'm not accusing you of any creationism or literalism.
Yeah.
You know, what's your point? Why did you make that connection? What's the meaning of the story of Genesis vis-a-vis Liz Eibel's book?
No problem. We're gonna, as soon as I get past this first Genesis 1, we're gonna hit that hard. So. Well, partly.
And are you at all suggesting that one foreshadowed, you know, the discovery, the scientific discovery?
Yes, I'm suggesting that it foreshadowed it. And I think they're the same thing. I mean, Isabel in her books plays with that idea metaphorically, but she never really takes it seriously, which is no problem. I mean, there's only so much you can take seriously, and she did a fine job of what she did. But I'll talk about that a lot, because that's a very complicated issue. I mean, I would say to begin with that the systems that you use to deal with radical uncertainty are the same systems that your primate ancestors evolved to deal with snakes. That's a good start. So, okay? Okay, one more and then we're done.
Good morning. I'm an aerospace science engineer and an expert computer programmer, and I have 3 rapid-fire questions, so I'm going to get through them quick. Based on your opinion of where the universities now stand in terms of humanities and social sciences, is mathematics more powerful than articulated speech?
I'm not sure, I'm not exactly sure how the
Does
first...
it make you more powerful to study mathematics and hard science in university?
Oh, well, it depends on what you mean by power, I guess. I mean, obviously studying mathematics and computer science makes you insanely powerful. The question is, to what end? And I don't think that you can extract an answer to that from the study of mathematics. The humanities are there to ground people in proper citizenhood. That's a way of thinking about it. And so, yes, it makes you powerful, but then the question is, who has the power? Because it might not be you. It might be the mathematics, so to speak. You know, because you never know what you're an agent of, precisely. And so, yeah, well, look, I've got nothing against computer programmers. I mean, more power to you guys, and mathematicians as well. But
mathematics would be a tool, not
yes, and it has to be a tool. Right, it has to be a tool of something. And what the humanities were for was to tell people what the tools should be used for. And so the tools themselves are crazily powerful. But that's not necessarily, you know, an untrammeled good. So I have to stop because...
One more about art.
Okay, quick.
You love art, I know you love
Okay.
art. You want to answer this question, all right?
Okay.
Okay, you were in this, I guess, one room in a museum in New York where
Yeah.
you'd seen some original Renaissance artwork masterpieces.
Yeah.
Like, these are generally accepted as amazing artifacts, okay? Does an original work of art, as opposed to a high-fidelity reproduction, contain the spirit of the artist who created it, and does this account for the disparity in how much you'd have to pay for an original?
It does in part. I knew a good portrait artist, and one of the things he pointed out about a great portrait is that it actually contains time. So, you know, because a photograph is one instant, but a portrait is you layered on you, layered on you, so it's got a thickness, you know, and I think you can see that thickness in the original, but it's also a direct manifestation of that creative act of perception. And I don't think you get that. You just can't get the fidelity of the original with the reproduction. But there's more to it than that too, because the painting doesn't end with the frame. You know, like we tend to think of the painting itself as the object, but most objects are densely innervated with historical context. And you can say, well, the historical context isn't the object, but it depends on what you mean by the object. And often people, when they buy a piece of a painting, are buying the historical context, and you just don't get that with the reproduction. It's a kind of magic. It's like Do you want to have Elvis Presley's guitar or another guitar just like it? Well, you want to have Elvis's guitar. It's why. You can't tell it's Elvis's guitar by looking at it.
Yeah, but why would you want it? Was there any rational reason for wanting the original? I mean, it's exactly the same. It's a perfect fidelity reproduction. It's such a thing.
Well, it is at the level of detail, but not at the level of context. That's how it looks to me. Okay, we got to go. Thank you.